Hi, my name is Mary Wong, and I am the author of Pathways to Pregnancy, registered traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and acupuncturist in downtown Toronto, and founder of Alive Holistic Health. And tonight, I want you to welcome an amazing guest that I have for you here. It's Dr. Norbert Gleicher. But before I do so, this is my post number 68. So I have to say, this is pretty awesome that we're doing this now. It's been over a year. So thank you, lovely people, for joining in all the time. And so tonight we're going to talk about PGS. And I'll ask Dr. Norbert questions, Gleicher, about the questions, because this comes up a lot, and which is pre-implantation genetic screening. And this test, I find, years ago, they weren't doing it so much, but I find now every clinic is offering it up. Like it's just part of the regular screening tests. And we want to know the truth about it. And so that's why I have Dr. Gleicher here. And he is the founder of the Center for Human Reproduction. And they've been open since 1981. After completing his residency at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York and holding top academic and administrative positions in various academic institutions in New York and Chicago. So the center is in New York. He's always keen on simultaneously pursuing clinical care and research. Dr. Gleicher has published hundreds of peer-reviewed medical journal articles, abstracts, and book chapters, in addition to editing textbooks that are now regarded as classics. Dr. Gleicher also holds an adjunct professorship appointments at Rockefeller University in New York City, as well as in the Medical University of Vienna. So I really want to thank you for being here. Dr. Gleicher, you're on right now.
Hello.
And I actually want to add in, I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Gleicher in the flesh, where I did a presentation for him and his staff. And what I want to say about that is, first of all, it was great to get such a warm welcome and to have the openness to receive someone from what we call ancillary services, or, from the alternative medical practice. It's really great to see the ability to integrate medicine. So thank you for having me there. And it's an honor to have you with us tonight. So I'll just go ahead and ask the very first question is, what exactly is PGS?
PGS is what we call an add-on to in vitro fertilization. And the idea behind PGS is and was from the very beginning that if we test embryos before we replace them in the uterus and make sure that they're chromosomally normal, that would improve pregnancy rates. Because it was always believed that having chromosomally abnormal embryos is the main reason why so many embryos that we put back into the uterus do not implant. And so this was a very wonderful sounding idea, but as so many times in medicine and in biology in general, a hypothesis does not yet make the final truth. And results from PGS have been very, very disappointing so far.
So what do you mean by that exactly when you say disappointing so far? So how effective is it really? So I guess maybe very specifically, would there be women that would benefit from this?
The answer to that question will depend on what one considers a benefit. When PGS was initially introduced, the principal expected benefit from PGS was that, as I said, it would improve pregnancy rates, because the idea was that if we exclude chromosomally abnormal embryos from transfer, the remaining embryos will have a much higher implantation rate, and therefore pregnancy rates will be higher. That proved not to be the case. And the reason for it is really twofold. First of all, because it turns out that the technology that genetics laboratories use to determine whether an embryo is normal or not is not as good as used to be believed. Even more advanced and more recently introduced diagnostic platforms are not capable of really making a really accurate determination whether an embryo is normal and therefore can be transferred, or is abnormal and therefore should be discarded. But the second reason why the PGS technique has been such a disappointment to many of us is that we learn to understand more about what happens in very early stages of embryo development. And we have, over the last few years, learned many very surprising things, which really now explain why PGS is not the great idea we used to think it was. And one of the very important things we learned is that chromosomal abnormalities in embryos, in early stage embryos, are really very frequent and may be universal. And so as a consequence, what we learned over the last, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years only is that if we assume that every chromosomal abnormality we detect means that's a bad embryo, we end up throwing out a lot of very good embryos.
But that's what's happening, exactly.
This is what unfortunately has been happening, and our center, the Center for Human Reproduction here in New York City, was actually the first one to set the alarm already in 2012. And we really, in selected cases since 2012, started putting back embryos that were reported to be abnormal in selected cases. And already in 2013, we had our first healthy birth. And since then, over 100 healthy babies have been born worldwide in various centers where so-called bad embryos have been transferred. And that obviously is the ultimate piece of evidence that PGS is not what it was initially promised. New York Magazine just a month and a half ago actually published a lead article on this subject where the writer very well described the conceptual changes that have happened over the last few years in regards to PGS.
Right. So I read that, and I have shared it with those of you who are watching now. If you go through my Facebook page, you'll see this article it's called The Cut from the New York Magazine. And I'm not sure what the date on it is, but it's on there. So I think that's very important. But so do you even use PGS then at your clinic?
We do use PGS under two rare circumstances. The first one is if we explain to a patient what I've just explained to you and the listeners, and they still want it. You know, we are not here to tell people how to live their lives. We are here to give people the right information and then let them make choices. And the second situation where we use PGS is if there's a reason to do sex selection in embryos, because the determination of X and Y chromosomes is very accurate. So for that purpose, it works.
Okay. But see, in Canada, it's illegal to do such a thing.
That is true. But in the United States, it is legal to do it. And it is also done for medical reasons because they are so-called sex-linked diseases where you on purpose select a female because a disease will occur only in a male, for example.
Right, of course. So that makes sense for sure. So then for women that, I don't know if there's such a thing as could PGS work better for a younger woman versus a woman over 40?
Well, in principle, as I said, at least our center and an increasing number of colleagues have kind of almost given up on PGS in general. But if there is an ideal patient who produces large numbers of excellent embryos,
Yes.
and where it does not matter that maybe by mistake a few healthy embryos are being discarded as a consequence of the procedure, in these women, the selection may speed up the time to pregnancy. But even that is quite questionable, and appropriate studies have not been performed. And the second group where maybe there is a chance that PGS does something, but that also is still very questionable, and recently there was at least one study that suggested otherwise, are women who have repeated pregnancy loss.
Right.
Where the assumption again is that it is chromosomal pregnancy loss. But as it turns out, our notions about this subject also were kind of pretty wrong. We used to believe that almost all miscarriages are chromosomal in nature, and now newer data suggests that it's probably not more than half. So a lot of things are changing in our field as our basic biology colleagues are discovering amazing things in early embryo stages, and we obviously have to learn from them.
So wow, that what you just said, but is new to me when you said it's only chromosomal issues for miscarriage, for example, is only 50% of the equation.
Yeah, that's what new data suggests. We used to believe it's much more than that.
Wow. Yeah. So thank you for bringing this to light. That's fantastic to know. So, it is really important then also, because we also talk about when people do embryo transfers, how it's important to really have what I call a juicy uterus and a receptive uterus. So then are we saying then 50% is actually the uterus?
No.
No.
We're not saying that, but 50% are other causes, probably to a large degree, the immune system.
Oh, gotcha. Of course, yes, yes.
Because the embryo that is trying to implant is kind of like a little parasite that is trying to break through the skin. In this case, the mucosal membrane in membranes of the endometrium. And in principle, our immune system is there to prevent this kind of stuff from happening. So there needs to be appropriate immune adjustment, or what is called tolerance development by the maternal immune system to let the embryo through. And it appears that is maybe a much more frequent issue than we used to assume.
Okay, so yes, immune factor for sure is there. So in your clinic then, I mean, now we're going a little off topic, but not, because it's all about fertility in the end. Yeah. So if there is immune factor involved, are you doing like the LIT, or the IVIG protocol, like using blood products? What are you doing?
We use different things, and it really comes down what we find in the immune evaluation of the patient. And we kind of have a stepwise approach. The more severe it appears that her immune system is dysregulated, the more aggressive we are in our treatments. And yes, we use sometimes intravenous gamma globulin. We use anti-inflammatory treatments. As I said, we try to individualize.
Right. And I love it that you say individualize, because I find that oftentimes you go to a fertility clinic and it's pretty well cookie cutter solutions. And as you know, everyone's an individual. So I love your approach, because it's very much in line with Chinese medicine, which is literally looking at each individual as an individual.
Yeah, this has evolved at our center over the last 15 years. 15 years ago, we also had cookie cutter approaches, but we over the years have become a tertiary center of kind of last resort. We do not see the same kind of fertility patients that most other fertility centers treat. Over 90% of the patients who come to us have failed IVF cycles elsewhere, and over half of our patients come to us long distances. So it's a very, very special population, and in that population, you have to individualize because everybody has 10 different problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's really great. Gee, I wish you were in Toronto, but you're not. But
I tell you something that after New York, Toronto is our second biggest market. We have a lot of patients from Toronto.
Right. Well, and the viewers are actually from anywhere and everywhere. So for those of you who have been struggling with fertility challenges and you are actually at a fertility clinic and you're up to here and you want something different, then it is a place to look at. And I do see people, traveling, as you see. You said what, 50% is people from
over half of our patients come to us long distance. Many from Europe, the Middle East, South America, but and the rest from the US and Canada.
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I know, like there's some big clinics in New York, and I see that when they fail there, they go to your clinic. So it's like, wow, why don't we just go to your clinic, right?
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, I have my child, thankfully. So, but it's...
there's always place for a second one or a third one.
Well, okay. All right. I'll just throw it out there, everybody. I'm turning 50 next week. So I think I'm done. I'm good. I know I'm energetic, but I think there's only energy to a point. But thank you. So, okay. Any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share that you can enlighten our patients with, or sorry, not patients, just women in general?
Well, I think we live in incredibly exciting times in our specialty and in many other specialties in medicine. But what we are currently learning on a really almost daily basis about what is happening in early embryo developmental stages is so important to how we are practicing and certainly how we will be practicing in the near future. And it is also of great importance for other areas of medicine, because when you think about it, all of stem cell science that has had such an impact in recent years, all of that started with embryonic stem cells. And we are really on the verge of revolutionary changes, not only in human fertility treatment, but in medicine in general. And everything starts with the embryo. It's the computer that has all of our lives pre-programmed from the very, very beginning.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And so I might add, though, too, you are a Western physician, scientist, professor, and I really want to acknowledge you for doing what you do, because you are an outlier. Because a lot of the doctors out there, they just follow protocols and they don't question the science. And I love it that you and your whole clinic question science and its validity, and you're constantly, pushing that envelope and saying, hey, maybe we need to question this. Maybe it's not as good as we think it is. And I see that you constantly do that with everything that evolves. So I really want to thank you for that. And I equate it to, when science thought that the world was flat, right? And so you guys figured it out. The world is actually not flat. So same in this fertility world. So thank you.
It happens in science everywhere. There's always a knowledge of the moment. But everybody who does not recognize that knowledge constantly evolves, must evolve, is really not a real scientist.
I agree. And so, heartfelt thank you for being here and speaking out. And I know that anyone who will be watching this will really benefit from this. And perhaps, in the future, you might want to return. And there's certainly lots of other things we can talk about. Do you still, by chance, use DHEA?
Of course.
Okay, well, no, not of course. So I would love an interview about that in some later date, if that's okay with you.
Happy to do it.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm sure I'll get suggestions from our viewers. And I also know, as I had mentioned earlier, that oftentimes when people watch this and they're suffering in silence, they don't really want other people to know. So Facebook is quite a public type of media, so they don't put up their hands to ask questions. But I see the uptake, I see the views that people are actually watching, but they watch it in silence and they watch it within their own home. So I know that people will benefit from this, and they may be more outpouring and perhaps requests of other topics. And if you're willing to share that, that would be so fantastic.
Be happy to.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Gleicher. And thank you all for joining me, my beautiful people. And so next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be talking to Jan Silverman, who is a fertility counselor and who has won awards being the best fertility counselor on earth, I'll say. And it's nearing to be holiday season. So for a lot of people that are suffering through fertility, this is a very difficult time. So to get you through the holidays, I want to interview her and get some great tips on how to navigate Christmas and holiday time and thrive, and perhaps learn to say no. Okay, so please join us next Wednesday. Scroll down, look at all the previous videos, pick up my book, Pathways to Pregnancy, check it out. There's lots of information on there, hopeful and inspiring. So join me next time. Thank you. Take care. Bye for now.